Hello, welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. Today I have a very special guest, a dear friend, Dr. Trevor Apple, Springs Valley Community School Corporation Superintendent, located in French Lick, Indiana. Dr. Apple, my friend, thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
Thanks, Kevin. It's good to be here with you.
I am taking this opportunity, Dr. Apple, as we've spoken for our viewers and listeners, to bring people on who have had a chance, individuals, men and women, who've played a big part of my life from leadership and bringing value, not only to me, but have provided positive value to others. And Dr. Apple is a dedicated leader as well as educator throughout his life. And I'm just so happy to have him with us today. And I hope that there's a nugget or two that all of you joining us will be able to take away as you further step forward in your leadership journey. Dr. Apple, with all that said, my friend, why don't you talk a little bit about your background and introduce to our listeners and viewers who Trevor Apple is as a person, as a leader.
All right, Kevin, I am a 1986 graduate of Springs Valley High School, lifelong Valley resident, went to school at Valley my entire school career. I'm in my 23rd year here at Springs Valley. I've married to a Springs Valley graduate, the former Teresa Kellums. We have two sons, Kyle and Nathan, who are also Springs Valley graduates. And I have been an educator at Springs Valley for 23 years. I got into education a little bit late in my life, but all of my career has been spent here at Springs Valley. Been teacher, coach, building administrator, and now fortunate enough to get to try out this superintendent role.
Dr. Apple, talk a bit, if you will, about your career leading up to education, and then why education? Where's that commitment to serving as basically a lifelong educator, teacher come from?
Yeah, so prior to that, to be honest with you, I was unsure of what my career path was going to be. Got married young, had our first son, Kyle, pretty young. And shortly after his birth, just decided that I enjoyed him. I enjoyed being around kids. My wife was a teacher. She came home just really excited about the impact that she had on her students. And I did pretty well in high school, and I liked high school. I liked elementary school here at Valley. So just fell together. I thought, I'm going to go back and teach. I'm an avid reader. It was a natural kind of tendency for me to get into the English side of it. So I became an English teacher. Spent a good portion of my career as an English teacher at Springs Valley High School and in junior high. And once I got through that, I had the opportunity to do some administrative roles, and it's just progressed from there.
You and your wife have certainly had an opportunity to make an impact on the students. And I know I'm going to generalize my age a little bit, as Dr. Apple certainly comes across, I'm sure for everyone, as the younger of the two individuals here doing the talking today, much younger in that regard. Dr. Apple, looking back, was it the 1800s when public education and Horace Mann, basically, for lack of a better word, came into existence or was created? But education really hasn't changed from what the core focus is. It's all about adding value and bringing those growth and challenges to the kids.
Yeah, that's it. That's the whole focus. It's the students. And there are days when you don't feel like you're making that impact, but then later on you meet a student who thanks you, or thank you for being my teacher, or hey, I remember that one time in class you said this and that's really stuck with me. And we don't always do it for that, but it's just great feedback to hear. And it also is very indicative of what our role is, and that's just to make an impact in young people's lives.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So much respect for educators, not only at Springs Valley, but in the state of Indiana and around the country of the United States of America and the world. They are so very special individuals because there, without question, Dr. Apple, are some nuances and challenges that many other industries don't have to face.
Yeah, that's right. And especially nowadays, we've always been on the academic side of things, trying to get students prepared for a career or post high school life. But now you throw in on top of the academic requirements, we have students coming to school with lots of social needs, behavioral needs, and teachers have just really become good at addressing the whole child and trying to turn out well-rounded individuals and productive citizens.
I know Dr. Apple and his team certainly have a positive track record for their school community, as do many other schools, and most schools for that matter, that I've had an opportunity to be involved with and interact with. And we hope through this conversation with Dr. Trevor Apple, again, the school superintendent at Springs Valley Community Schools, located in French Lick, Indiana, roughly about an hour west of Louisville, Kentucky, east of Louisville, Kentucky.
We're a little bit to the northwest of
Northwest.
Louisville. Yep.
There's a lot of connotations that turn into negativity when it comes to education. And unfortunately, Dr. Apple, it seems like most of the media and most of the publicity comes when there's issues or there's second guessing or third guessing or fourth guessing. But really, through this discussion, we want to take an opportunity to point out the positive things that are taking place in your school corporation and from your experience in that regard, because there's so many more positive things taking place in our school buildings, on our school campuses, that really many individuals are never aware of in that aspect. But Dr. Apple, as we kick off, let's talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy and maybe one or two individuals that have impacted you as you've developed your leadership toolbox.
Yeah. The first individual I would say has impacted me as a leader is my wife, Teresa. As I said, she is a past educator. She is out of the profession now due to some health issues, but she's still very much in the game, so to speak, very avid about keeping up on things and wanting to know what's going on in school. And we have, sometimes you come home and you want to leave work at work, but we're able to have some very productive conversations about things. She provides support to me. I couldn't do the job without her support. She serves as a sounding board on some things. If we're having some circumstances or issues or challenges, I'm able to run those things by her, get her perspective. And she plays devil's advocate a lot with me. And she challenges me a lot. Sometimes I throw something out there and there's something I want to hear back, but I don't necessarily get that. And so she helps me think through the pros and cons of things. And I don't 100% go with what she says, but she just is a great support to me and helps me think through those situations. Also, another person, that the late Roger Fisher, was a good impact on me. Mr. Fisher started my education career. He hired me as a teacher here at Springs Valley when he was superintendent, or he was part of that hiring process. And in an indirect way, has just been a mentor to me. I've looked up to the way he did things here at Springs Valley and tried to emulate that in many ways. Kept up with him throughout his retirement, and he was always good to give some advice, tell some good stories, just lighten the mood, help to improve my attitude a bit. So those would be the two off the top of my head that would have had an impact on me as a leader.
I appreciate you referencing Mr. Fisher, who recently passed, unfortunately, but what a wonderful individual in particular. And you mentioned about his ability to lighten the moment and help the attitude. Mr. Fisher was always able to provide the sense of humor moment that you needed, whether he was a classroom English teacher, a basketball official, a coach, or later on, what a diverse background in education, right? From teaching, coaching, officiating, high school, junior high, middle school sports, district leadership, building leadership at multiple schools, not just at Springs Valley.
Yeah. He had a world of experience. And I believe I heard a different story every time I was around him, but everyone was just as entertaining as the other. And just a great guy, and can really put your mind back on the right direction when you need it.
And we need that as leaders. Dr. Apple, one of the things I admire in you, and you and I have known each other, I was trying to think this through a little bit time-wise, probably right around 40 years or so, give or take, the early to mid 1980s, perhaps in that regard. But one of the things that I know I've struggled with in my career, and quite frankly, personally, is at times allowing that moment to bringing that sense of humor to that moment and not allowing the moment to engulf the opportunity just to enjoy. As you mentioned, people like Mr. Fisher, Mr. Akers, the late Chuck Akers, and others in the Springs Valley community, it just seemed to be so natural for them. And it's a skill that I look back on and wish I had learned that and learned how to keep that in my life.
Yeah, same here. That's not my style. I'd like it to be, definitely gaining some experiences and some stories that I hope, when I'm retired, I can pass that on and share some of those things with others. But Roger had a knack for that, and some people do and some people don't, and that was just a gift of his.
I appreciate your comment as well earlier about the manner of which you use your wife as a sounding board and she offers feedback. I really appreciate the devil's advocate or the Luigi setting, because I know that you're looking for the honest feedback, but at times as leaders, we're seeking feedback. And many times we go in pretty confident we know what the answer is. And when the feedback's not that way, it really cracks the egg a little bit.
Yeah, it does. It's jarring. You think, oh, maybe I better think of that in a little different way.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that. I had the blinders on, but it's good to have that. And like I said, there are times when I say no, I still think this is what I should do or this is the way to go. But just having that person to talk it out with, and she's not afraid to tell me what she thinks, and I appreciate that.
And knowing you, Dr. Apple, and your commitment to education, as most educators I have been around or come to know and respect in my lifetime and my career, it's all about serving. It's whether it's the students, the parents, the school community, serving not necessarily because everyone's going to agree with the serving, but serving to ensure that tomorrow's better than today. For educators, there's a lot of things that stack up a bit, if you will, on when it comes to serving others. So it becomes much important, at least through my experience, much more important, I should say, to be able to serve ourselves in that regard. Talk a little bit about how you feel like you've been successful or maybe some obstacles you faced in being able to increase your own value to ensure you can expand what you can offer to others, the kids in particular.
Yeah. One of the things I've tried to do, and a little bit more so as my career has gone on. Kevin, I'm going to plug in here. Looks like my laptop's about to go dead, so let me plug
You're
that in.
okay. I had to plug in right before we started and charge a battery or two. So I get that.
Yeah. All right. I try to provide myself with some type of daily restorative time, whether that is through stillness, just simple stillness, isolation, meditation, prayer, could be going down and doing some treadmill work or something like that. But I have found that I need that time. And some days I don't feel like it. Some days I feel like it might be a waste of time. But I have found that's a value add thing for me, that I do better when I take the time, that I'm more productive, I'm more open, I'm more cheerful, what have you. So I try to get that daily restorative time in for myself. And then I also just have been lately with after working with you a little bit on strengths is just trying to make myself available to people on a daily basis, just being consistent with that, get into buildings and talk to people as much as they can. Sometimes I neglect that. Sometimes I neglect myself, thinking that I don't need the interaction or I don't need the restoration. But then later I found out, no, I needed that. I should have done that.
I appreciate you in that regard, Dr. App. But the example you just offered of the modeling really goes to the need we have, regardless of where we are in our careers, regardless of the types of careers we have, the level of responsibilities, personally or professionally. It really does center on truly understanding ourselves and really listening and hearing ourselves, seeing ourselves for who we are. Similar to your discussion a moment ago about your wife's input and how at times she provides a different point of view, perhaps, than what you thought you were leaning towards in that regard. If we're not able to hear the words we're saying, be in the moment, if we're not able to see ourselves for how we may be coming across, then we really don't get to a point where we understand ourselves to the aspect, are we really on the path serving our purpose?
Sure. And for me, it's just when you're in any administrative role and especially the superintendent position, you're juggling a lot of balls there and a lot of things going on. And you can personally, I can get really overwhelmed at times with all of the different, what I want to say, all the different feedback I'm getting, all the different things that are coming at me. And I've learned that throughout the day, sometimes I just have to stop and take a minute and just calm myself, center myself, slow that breathing down, and just remember, okay, this is who you are. This is what you're trying to accomplish here. Everything's okay. And some days I do that and some days I don't, but definitely the days I do, it's definitely a value add situation for me.
And that's a change from previous eras, is it not? A bit. I know what I grew up in, and perhaps you a little bit as well. If you took a step back to catch your breath or to clear your mind or to clean your head, it was like you were shirking your duties, so to speak.
Right.
You weren't putting the time in that you needed to.
Yeah, or I'm going to be behind.
Yeah.
I'm going to get, if I don't go all day long, I'm going to get behind, but it's had the opposite impact on me. And it's just become an important part of my daily practice, both here at work, just taking it, like I said, just taking a minute to shut my door and just be calm for a little bit. Then I can get back in and tackle a little bit more. But on those days when I don't, I go home, and that affects my relationships. When I don't take that time, that affects my relationship at home, affects my relationship with my staff. And so it's just important.
I think what I hear you saying is it's a value point, a value aspect that really is what reflection should be about, being self-aware. In an earlier episode interview I had, I think I made this comment maybe more than once, but I think the mindset, when you hear you need to be self-aware, you need to know yourself, I took away many times. I looked in the mirror today. It's a one-time thing, right? I don't have to do it again. Or I look in the mirror and that's still me. But the reality is self-awareness comes from the moment, the day, the week, the month. It's always available for us, and we should be working that.
Right. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing for sure. And it's a relief to know that is an outlet that's available. I don't look at it anymore as something to dread or, oh, I don't want to face being introspective or anything like that. It's a bonus to me to be able to know that I have that and be able to take the time to do that.
There's a bonus coming up here as I want to wrap up this first episode. Dr. Apple has agreed to stick around for a second episode. Dr. Apple, you and I both athletic-minded, so to speak. You much more talent than I ever have, but just love the aspect and the camaraderie, the team building, the competitive pieces that can build leadership. And in particular, when we look at Coach John Wooden, and you mentioned about stillness and slowing things down at times. Coach Wooden was known many times when his team went a little too fast, just guiding them to slow down, and you'll go as quick as you need to and be successful in that piece. And as we wrap up this episode, Coach Wooden coached in the 40s, 50s, 60s to the mid 70s, but those philosophies still work today. They're still relevant today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a timeless principle. And many of his principles are timeless. In addition, such as paying attention to the details, fundamentals, doing the small things just like that. This is the same thing. Just taking the time to take care of yourself, slow down, and really put things in perspective. That's the thing. Sometimes, perspective becomes, you get so wrapped up in all the work and all the things you're trying to accomplish. And pretty soon, something in that line is going to suffer if you don't take that step back. So, yeah, still very important. It's good to know that I'm using one of Coach Wooden's principles there for myself.
Absolutely. Listen, my friend, I appreciate your willingness to stick around. We're going to put a wrap on this episode. We're going to pick up a little bit at the start of the second episode and just talk about transformation, transition. Things that have changed as your leadership career has developed and some of the takeaways and adjustments you've made in that regard. Leadership Synergized isn't about being fast. It's not about being the first. It's not about multitasking. It's about being still, seeing things, calming the situation perhaps, but understanding it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to admit that mistake as long as we're being honest as leaders and truly becoming self-aware. We're growing forward, and we're having and making a positive difference in that regard. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership Synergized, and I appreciate Dr. Trevor Apple's time. And Trevor will be back with us on the next episode of Leadership Synergized.